Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian here at the Halifax International Security Forum in Nova Scotia, Canada, one of the world's leading gatherings of defense, security, economic, and civil society thought leaders from around the world. And we're talking to Jānis Garisons, who is the State Secretary for Defense, Latvia's State Secretary for Defense. Sir, thanks very much for joining us, especially on your Independence Day.
Thank you for mentioning it.
Well, we talked about it a little bit before we got started. Talk to us about, I want to start with Russia, obviously. Your big, very relaxed neighbor that you've had a very long relationship with, some positive, some less positive. Talk to us a little bit about a Latvian perspective on what you're seeing, whether it's the recent Zapad exercises or the behavior overall from Moscow that is driving your strategic planning. What are the things that the Russians are doing that every day either keep you awake or make you work harder to better defend your nation?
Well, I think there's two issues that keeps us awake. One thing, of course, is the military part of that, because, and it's not only recent Zapad. We've seen the military build up on the eastern side of the border since, I would say, 2012. In 2013, Russians opened a new helicopter base just 37 kilometers from our border, and it's now fully equipped. We saw basically more complicated exercises along our borders, eastern border and above Baltic Sea, and many other things. I think during Zapad, we were not expecting much new things happening because they've been doing a lot of things already previously. What was probably surprised us to some extent that during Zapad exercise we played, I would say, in Russian hands by focusing on Belarus as de facto. The biggest effort went somewhere else, not in the Belarus where everybody was expected. And that, of course, bothers us. We have to build our own capabilities, and we have to integrate NATO forces, which are present right now on our soil. But I think with everything that has been done, I feel more comfortable that we are ready to respond. We are agile. And we actually, I think that what is important is awareness, because as we've seen in Ukraine, that's a part of the problem, a big part of the problem was lack of awareness and undecisiveness. And that is something that we have to avoid. And with the presence of troops, with the attention turned towards what's happening in our region, awareness is growing, and that's, I think, we are happy about that. And another thing is what we are daily worried about, all information warfare, what we're facing, and it's our daily life, what we have to cope with.
I wanted to ask you about that, but let me first ask you about the Canadian Battle Group. 100 Canadian troops, also part of a bigger organization where there are Italians, Spaniards also that are involved and stationed in Latvia. Talk to us about the importance of that exercise and how your forces are working with the NATO troops, with the NATO troops from other NATO nations, I should say, in sort of refining, improving your operations and especially your defensive posture.
Well, I think usually people don't even understand all complexity or what does it mean to deploy troops and operate together. And therefore, I would name at least few benefits what this battle group brings. It's of course it brings complete new capabilities because we don't have heavy tanks and in our possession, and unfortunately we will not be able also sustain such capability nationally in at least in the next decade. And therefore that of course is very important capability. From the second point, what Canadian led battle group brings to us is the awareness of situation, because they are the first monitors of and they will report to the government as I mentioned already, those they will be aware of, and there will not be issues like who those tanks belong, as it happened in Ukraine. The third point, I think, what is important, integration of forces, because not only in the battle group but also with our national forces. And that is, it's easy to say to fight together, but then another is completely different to be able to fight together. And next, and probably last but not least, is they learn our geography, because to operate in the Baltics, it seems very easy on the map. But it's in reality it's very difficult with our swamps, with our terrain. You can't move across as it might seem very easily, and as Rand predicted, 72 hours Russian march to Riga. It's that is very important thing what our allies have to learn, basically to learn not only how to operate in Afghanistan, in Iraq, but also how to operate in our terrain.
Let me talk to you about the disinformation campaigns. What's the best way to combat that? Because your government has faced a lot of it. All the Baltic governments have. We just got back from Norway. That's happening in Norway. It's been happening in Sweden. It's been happening across Europe. We're now finding, Prime Minister Theresa May talking about, and British officials now more openly talking about how Russians may have been involved in Brexit. Obviously, there's an investigation going on in the United States about Russian meddling. Talk to us about some of the insidious ways Russia is always working. And what are the right ways for the alliance, for Latvian authorities to respond to ensure that they have the confidence of their citizens to be able to actually have the accurate story out when your adversary has a lot of tools they can use to undermine your government and the alliance every day?
Well, exactly. We've been facing that kind of situation for decades, and it's nothing new for us. I think the worst case what you can do to fight propaganda with counter-propaganda. What I think what is important to work in few directions. First of all, you have to strengthen the resilience of your own population, because what is important that population is able to assess critically what they see, what they read, and many other things. They have to basically be aware of environment when they live in, and that I think is a big issue. Therefore, we actually currently working on introduction of state more those critical thinking in schools, and also some part of military education in our schools. Another thing what you have to do, you have to be quite transparent and permanently tell your own story. Because if you're not telling your story, then somebody else will tell. And of course, you have to react and reveal all cases of misinformation and propaganda. But that is actually very heavy work, but it should be done on a daily basis.
And thank you very much for telling your story to us. Talk to us a little bit about your priorities and your modernization priorities in particular. You announced the strategic plan last year. Talk to us about what are some of the priorities within that plan, and what are the modernization priorities in particular to improve the capabilities of your force.
Well, we have, if I may describe very broadly, the first priority for us was early warning and situation awareness. We invested a lot in sensors, radars, and things like that, because it's important to see what's happening around and not to be surprised. And that's what we're developing. Another thing what we're putting in reaction. The forces have to be able to react very quickly, and they be on certain readiness. The third issue is basically to add combat power. That is something that we need probably more. Therefore, investing currently in artillery, in air defenses, and the last one, we're developing our territorial force, which is National Guard, because we have to go to some extent probably learn those things that we forgotten since the Cold War, like counter-mobility, mobility, and which are attributed to territorial defense. And that is, in our case, National Guard, which has to take care of that.
Sir, happy 99th birthday to
Thank you
a free Latvia, and may you survive for another 1,000 years as a free independent state, sir. Thanks very much.
We will do everything to survive and to protect our independence.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.